Summer had turned to winter. Christmas had been nice. All Mitch's family had visited, and Christmas dinner had been eaten at his house. Frank had found his own place nearby in Bootle. Mitch and Frank's parents were nice, if a little ditzy, and they came to like their future daughter-in-law. "Mitchell, my sunshine, you found a grand girl there," exclaimed Richard Adams, a round-faced, jolly-looking man with dark hair, just like his son. Rose Adams smiled and nodded. "We thought our kid was definitely headed to the road marked bachelorhood. I'm so glad he found you, dear." Jane and Leanne had whipped up a wonderful Christmas dinner, which was gulped down in no time. On Boxing Day, Sylvia and Robert Albright came to visit. On seeing the blue Ford pull up outside, Jane flung open the door and practically ran into her father's arms. March 2003. "What?" exclaimed Sylvia Albright. Jane had just announced she was moving away from home as soon as possible. "Yeah, you heard. I'm getting out while the galling's good. You can't mollycoddle me forever." And her father, seeing a situation developing, intervened. Putting a hand on his wife's shoulder, he spoke to his daughter. "All right, Syl, don't get upset. Jane, you've gone quite mad. You do realise that Scotty Road's a dump." Jane looked at her father through eyes that were narrowed dangerously. "Ha! That's all you know. Last weekend I went to look at a flat, a very nice little place, and I've taken it, so shove that." With that, she slammed the door behind her and ran upstairs, leaving two very worried parents in her wake. What a difference a little space makes, she thought. "Dad!" cried Jane as he put his arms around her. At 65, Robert Albright was still a handsome man with clear blue eyes and a mop of wavy blonde hair. "Hello, precious," he greeted. "Where's this young fellow of yours, then?" Jane almost dragged her dad in by the hand to meet her fiancé. Her mother smiled as she followed. She almost had been a daddy's girl. Soon drinks were being handed round as well as presents. Robert Albright liked Jane's fiancé almost immediately. He was handsome, but more importantly, he was grounded, sensible, and he loved his daughter. Leaving Sylvia and Mitch to talk indoors, Robert and his daughter put on their coats and went for a walk. "He seems nice. I think you'll do well with him," he commented as he walked, arms linked with his daughter. "He is nice, and I'm glad you like him. Once we're married, I'm moving out of that little flat and into his place down the road in Bootle." They walked in companionable silence for a spell or two. "Dad, why didn't you come for last Christmas? You can't have been very happy at home on your own. Did you and Mum have a row?" Jane broke the silence. Robert Albright shook his head. "No, precious. Your Mum, you know she's always worried so much about you. We knew we had to let you live your own life, but me and your Mum wrapped you up in cotton wool, and for that, I'm sorry." He paused for a minute, trying to get his thoughts together. "When you left home, your Mum was in a terrible state. Nearly made herself ill, she did. I couldn't bear to see her like that. I love your Mum. You know that, but I just knew what would happen when the two of you got together and that it would tear the two of you apart. I didn't want to see that." Jane nodded in understanding. "Well, let's get back home and have some mince pie. We can give Mum some extra attention." Smiling, Robert Albright took his daughter's hand and kissed it. "Despite your problems, young lady, you've grown into a fine woman." Jane smiled and kissed her father on the cheek. "Thanks, Dad. You're not so bad yourself." When they got back, Mitch and Sylvia were chatting happily. "How's Tony?" questioned Jane. "Didn't he want to come?" Sylvia Albright turned from her conversation and smiled. "He's spending Christmas with Donna." "Oh," said Jane, mildly surprised. "Could a reconciliation be on the cards?" "Maybe," came the reply. The Albrights had stayed the night at a family friend's place in Toxteth. After spending the following morning with Jane and her fiancé, they had headed for home. Jane was misty-eyed as she watched the car move off. Mitch put his arms around her. "The final phase in letting me go," whispered Jane. Mitch nodded before they headed back inside. With a week to go before the wedding, things were desperately crazy. Jane had found a gorgeous, simple cream silk wedding dress and fallen in love with it. Leanne, who was known to do a little dressmaking in her time, was altering it for her. "You've got to calm down, girl. You're losing too much weight, and you don't want the dress to look like it's swamping you, do you?" commented Leanne, as they did an alteration the Monday before the wedding. That evening, instead of the traditional hen and stag do, Leanne, Frank, Mitch and herself were getting together for drinks. She was taking some college friends out the next day. Thankfully, none of them were wild or heavy drinkers, she thought. Jane Albright and too much alcohol didn't mix too well. With music in the background and the soft chatter in the living room, the atmosphere was warm and cosy. Charlie, who never did like the word bed, was as usual giving everyone the runaround. The 2-year-old was fast as lightning and slippery as soap. "Charlie, give that CD to Mummy or you'll break it and hurt yourself." The child chuckled and said his new favourite word. "No," came the reply from the top. Leanne had put the child to bed and rejoined the adults in the living room of Jane's flat. "We were just discussing music," said Frank, looking up as Leanne came in the room. Mitch groaned. "Oh no, here we go. He's about to tell the tale of our college band. God, we were awful." Frank playfully slapped his brother's leg. "We weren't that bad." Leanne nodded as she remembered. "I recall going to see you two play at the college. Were you called the Maple Toffees?" Frank shook his head. "It was the Maple Leafs, and don't hold the name against it, Jane. We rocked." "I'll bet you did," said Jane, looking at her fiancé fondly. "Hold on a minute. I might just have a little something in the car," said Frank, getting up and disappearing for a minute or two. He came back in, carrying a bass and acoustic guitar. Mitch groaned again. These two should be in a Liverpool museum, along with the mallet haircuts we had." Frank laughed and handed his brother the acoustic guitar. "My son, it was the late 80s, and it wasn't all that long ago. Now how about we do our signature tune?" Reluctantly, he agreed, and they both tuned up their guitars. Jane and Leanne settled on the floor. Finally, the guitars were as ready as they'd ever be. Mitch had always suffered from stage fright and had never let anyone hear him sing since his college days. He had been the lead singer in the band, and oddly enough, the shyest. Jane would never have guessed his secret, but she was looking forward to hearing the brothers play. Mitch played a few bars. Then a surprisingly crystal clear voice with just the slightest edge rang out in the room. "Life goes on day after day, hearts torn in every way, so ferry cross the Mersey and always take me there, the place I love. People, they rushed everywhere, each with their own secret care, and ferry cross the Mersey, 'cause this land's the place I love, and here I'll stay. People around every corner, they seem to smile and say, 'We don't care what your name is, boy, we'll never turn you away.' So I'll continue to stay here. I always will stay. And ferry cross the Mersey, 'cause this land's the place I love, and here I'll stay. And here I'll stay. will stay. The brothers played 2 more songs, You'll Never Walk Alone and She Loves You, before Mitch put his acoustic guitar down. I'm afraid that's me, John, he admitted, blushing slightly as the girls clapped. Hey, ventured Leanne, fancy doing a repeat performance at the wedding reception? No, came the reply from one brother.